The Israeli military is moving ahead with a ground operation in Rafah, which is towards the southern part of Gaza and borders Egypt. It is also a critical entry point for aid, humanitarian aid, amid the war with Hamas. And it also serves as an exit point for people in Gaza who want to flee to Egypt due to the war. This is despite many warnings from aid agencies like the UN and also Human Rights Watch. The US has also reportedly paused a shipment of arms to Israel amid these warnings. The UN Secretary General warns that a full-scale invasion of Rafah by Israeli forces would be a strategic mistake, a political calamity, and a humanitarian nightmare. While the Human Rights Watch said, with each day that Israeli authorities block life-saving aid, more Palestinians are at risk of dying. The Palestinian Health Ministry has claimed that over 34,000 people have died in this ongoing war. Some claim it's over 20,000 who are women and children. So coming back to the warning by the UN Secretary General, which says that it would be a strategic mistake, this is not the first time that we are seeing such a strategy play out in the region. To discuss all of this, I have with me my colleague Mohammad Ghazali, who has been tracking the region for quite some time now and has often reported on it as well. So Ghazali, for the benefit of our viewers, can you take us back to 1982 and 2006? What exactly happened there and how does it sound like a repeat of the same thing?
Yeah, thanks, Akhil. Basically, many experts have warned, or the historians have warned Benjamin Netanyahu that this entire war in Gaza against Hamas, and every time you see Mr. Netanyahu making a statement either on the floor of the Knesset or even during interaction with the media or international media, he keeps reiterating this point that he will eliminate Hamas, and that is exactly what has happened back in 1982 when Israel had attacked Lebanon, and back then PLO was operating from Lebanon, and a partial victory for Israel was that it had managed to push the PLO operatives from Lebanon, force those operatives to take exile in Tunisia and other countries, even including Yasser Arafat. But the same thing couldn't happen in 2006 when after the attack the war went on for almost 2 months before a UN monitored ceasefire was brokered between Israel and Lebanon. But by then, Hezbollah had grown much stronger, and till today, Hezbollah has been attacking Israel. So even in 82 and 2006, this entire aim of the Israeli state or the security apparatus was that it will dismantle this terror organization or the military, Hezbollah being the de facto military right now in Lebanon. But that didn't turn out to be a very successful experiment by Israel. So in that sense, perhaps everybody is hinting that despite this war is stretching for more than 6 months now, Hamas continues to fire rockets into Israeli territory. And this is not just Hamas, there are many other militant groups who are affiliated with Hamas. Al-Qassam Brigade is one. Then you have Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another outfit which is operating there. And they continue to even share videos on social media showing that how they have been damaging Israel's weaponry. They have been attacking. Just a day before yesterday, one of those crossing, Kerem Shalom crossing, which is one of those crossings between Israel and Gaza, monitored and controlled by Israel. Rockets are fired by Hamas, and it also killed 3 soldiers there. Then Kerem Shalom crossing was closed, one of those points or entry-exit points for the aid which comes from Israeli territory. Now, Israel claims that it has been reopened after Mr. Biden spoke to Mr. Netanyahu just a day ago. But the situation still remains the same because everybody is criticizing Mr. Netanyahu for the sake of it that before the war started, their ultimate goal was to dismantle Hamas.
Yeah.
But even after 7 months, Hamas continues to pound rockets.
So the Israeli military still claims that the Rafah invasion is important for them because that area is being used for terrorist purposes. It has also said that in addition to killing 20 fighters there, 20 Hamas fighters there, and destroying their infrastructure, They have also located 3 operational shafts. So, uh, of course, Israel is projecting it as a full-blown war against Hamas. But you said that you said that there's criticism, there's opposition to this move as well. So when we look at Israel right now, we have seen that there is some anger, if not widespread anger, against Netanyahu and his government. There are protests in Israel as well. Even then, he's strong on his position. He doesn't want to back down. He's projecting strength, and he's saying that he would not stop until Hamas is obliterated. There's another point here that the right-wing nationalist government in Israel may be pushing this through. Can you elaborate on this?
See, Mr. Netanyahu is caught by or bound by his own right-wing politicians or the kind of company he keeps. It is one of the most right-wing government in Israel. And back in 2022, when he was elected in December, when it appeared that Netanyahu has not gained majority, but with the support of leaders like Ismodrik, one of those right-wing leaders. Then you have, I'm forgetting his name, the internal security minister who recently met with a road accident, Ben Gavir.
Yeah.
So Itamar Ben Gavir. So these two politicians in every war cabinet have been stressing that you should not accept the hostage deal with Hamas. Rather, you should go in, dismantle Hamas, attack Hamas. If you don't do so, says these two politicians, these two say to the Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, that if you accept any kind of peace deal, if you any hostage negotiation goes on with Hamas, then perhaps we'll pull out our support,
Right.
and then your government will collapse. So that is exactly why Mr. Netanyahu also doesn't seem to be very interested in progressing with any peace deal with Hamas. And we saw that Hamas had actually agreed to the peace deal, the proposal which was floated by Qatar and Egypt. But Mr. Netanyahu later said that this is a watered down version of the peace deal we had proposed, because Hamas stresses on that Israel should completely withdraw, give it a complete ceasefire. We release all the hostages, and Israel withdraws all its troops permanently. But this is something which Mr. Netanyahu hasn't agreed upon, and that is why this war continues even today. And there is no sort of a hint that perhaps by when all the hostages will be brought back. And just I think it was reported even today in the international media that Hamas claims that another an old hostage, a very senior citizen, has also been killed in the bombing or the aerial bombing by IDF. So the situation is very critical as far as the hostage deal is concerned, because while the ground invasion is on, while the aerial bombing is going on, the humanitarian crisis exists, but there is no such information that perhaps Israel is in a position to retrieve all the hostages.
So coming back to Israeli domestic politics, what does Netanyahu have to lose? Why he's so indignant and so strong in his position? Can you briefly, for the benefit of our viewers, explain the domestic politics of Israel, the parties involved, what is Netanyahu's position in it, and if these ultra-nationalist right-wing parties decide to withdraw support, what does he stand to lose?
See, Netanyahu has always claimed in his polity that he is a security man, right? That whenever he was in power, Israel never faced this kind of attack which happened on October 7 last year. And nobody had imagined that perhaps Hamas will come up with something like this, that they'll breach the security walls and enter into Israel's territory to kill people. Now, but this has been the biggest blot on the politics of the career of Mr. Netanyahu. And he was back during the Oslo Peace Accord. He was also against President Rabin when he was he was part of the peace deal, Oslo peace deal with Yasser Arafat. And later, Mr. Netanyahu, back in 95 or 96, if I'm correct, he went in 95, he campaigned against Isaac Rabin, the then president of Israel, that he has chosen for a peace deal. And I'll tell you what is the psyche of the peace deal in Israel. Every time a peace deal is struck between Israel and Palestine, Israelis feel that they perhaps tend to lose the ground. Because the first peace deal happened in 79, the Camp David Accords between Egypt and Israel after the 1973 war, Yom Kippur War. Israel lost Sinai Peninsula, which was with Israel. Sinai and Gaza was with Israel, but in 1979 they had to let go Sinai.
Yes.
In 2005, when Ariel Sharon was the prime minister, then they had to give up Gaza Strip to the Palestinian Authority. Later, the elections happened, and then you know how Hamas took control of it. And every time now, whenever there is a talk of a peace deal, Israeli politicians on the right think that perhaps we'll end up losing the land.
Right.
And then the religious connotation of that entire holy land comes into the play. And anybody who agrees for this kind of politics is often blamed as traitor. So this is exactly what the right-wing politicians who are part of Netanyahu's government are exerting pressure on Netanyahu that if you go back to the same version of politics which you have been opposing all this while, then we will withdraw our support and your government will collapse. Now, that is not the ultimate threat to Netanyahu. The ultimate threat is that if the government collapses, then perhaps the opposition parties and all the corruption charges he has been facing, and he managed to stall it due to the war, due to the situation of war there, that people were protesting even before October 7.
Yeah.
So all that will return to haunt Mr. Netanyahu if the war stops and if hostages are brought back.
Okay, I think that nicely sums up the possible motivations behind Mr. Netanyahu's move. But let's get on to the most pertinent question that many are asking now. What happens to Gaza in case of a full invasion, in case that Israel goes in and refuses to back out? So how would Gaza look like then?
See, right now, different Arab countries or the neighboring Arab countries are reacting very differently. Like yesterday, this footage came in, the visuals showing that how IDF has entered into Rafah, and now they're moving towards the Rafah border crossing. They have pulled down the Palestinian flag and they have raised the Israeli flag there. But that has not gone down well with Egypt, because Egypt was the first, say, the Arab country to have signed a peace deal with Israel, and that peace deal was so much celebrated in the region that the leaders, Egyptian leader Anwar Sadat, came to Israel, and then he had delivered a speech in Knesset. So he was seen as a messiah there, that he's
Right.
somebody who's talking about peace, and then he was termed as traitor by the local population in Egypt and later assassinated. So Egypt has always backed Israel, even in this entire course of war for the last 6-7 months. Israel went up to the extent that it damaged the Rafah border crossing in the initial days of
Yeah.
war, when people were moving from north to south.
Yeah, we
Rafah-
remember the visuals then.
Yes,
Yeah.
and yet Egypt didn't do much. Except registering protest, Egypt didn't do much because Turkey halted its trade. Recently, we saw, but Egypt has always taken a very soft stand, and that is exactly what the population of Egypt has been claiming, that Mr. Fatah el-Sisi, the president there, he has very good rapport with Mr. Netanyahu. Now, when you talk of what happens to Gaza, there were talks earlier that US will ensure that there is a united Arab army if Hamas is dismantled as claimed by Israel or as intended during this war. Then perhaps there will be a united Arab army which will come from different countries and which will monitor the entire region, and perhaps they will choose one of those exiled exiled leader from the Gaza Strip or from the West Bank, from Fatah or from Hamas, those who are perceived to be very, what you can say, not from the very extremist camp, not from the hardliner camp, but somebody who's very soft
Right.
as far as the ideology is concerned. So that was the game plan. But the way Mr. Netanyahu has said that perhaps the force is there to stay. So as of now, it can't be said that permanently will Israel will try to reoccupy Gaza, as was the situation before 2005. But many experts or security experts say that Israel will not try to waste its resources in Gaza. They will better try to have a force there which will be less of a threat to them, like what they did in West Bank. After
Right.
all the peace deals and treaties, they actually managed to have Mahmoud Abbas or PA there, despite attacks coming from West Bank into Israel as well, but no such aerial threat. West Bank has never been an aerial threat to Israel. It's always about terror attack on ground, some stabbing, some
Right.
shooting incident happening there in isolation. but there has never been an aerial threat that
It
like
doesn't
what we
see it as a major security threat.
exactly. So Israel will the ideal situation for Israel would be to install a government or somebody as authority in Gaza as well, similar to West Bank, who a leader who is in direct communication with Israel, who also happens to have security coordination, exactly what the PA has with Israel in West Bank. That even IDF gets into West Bank, manages to arrest people, manages to kill people there, and they have all the coordination with the PA authorities, the Palestinian authorities, security forces there. So something of that sort will be arrangement will be an ideal situation for Israel to have there in Gaza, rather than putting their permanent security forces or IDF people being stationed there forever.
Okay, one last question. I think this has also been asked many, many times about the so-called silence of the Muslim world. So, what do you have to say about that?
See, I'll just share with you an anecdote. I don't remember the exact word of exact name of that professor. He's a professor in Columbia University. He's a Palestinian professor, and he has written an article I read in back in 2022 when I was in Israel, that why Arab world doesn't stand up to Israel. And it's a mere anecdotal. It doesn't have an evidence, and then we'll get into details. Perhaps we know that how Israel has a superb intelligence services, and it has
Right.
its services are being used by even those nations who don't have bilateral relations with Israel, say Bangladesh, say Malaysia, Indonesia. Reports keep emerging that how even Pakistan has secret deals with Israel when it comes to spy softwares and
Right.
apps. Now, that professor, I'm sorry that I can't recollect his name right now. He had written an article saying that back in 60s and 70s, when after the creation of the state of Israel, it has started developing relations with the opposition leaders in Arab world, the ones who are now in power. So those secrets are very well known to the Israeli system. There are authorities there.
Right.
So you have Jordan, which is one of the which is also called a vassal state of
Vassals,
US. So it's a model state. It shares borders with Israel. They have water agreement. They have security agreement, security coordination. Because when ISIS was attacking in Syria and in Lebanon, it was just Jordan which was saved by having coordination with Israel, which gave them aerial support as well. So I'm just talking about Jordan as one country, but generally the general sentiment in the Arab world and different think tanks have shown that how the authorities in these countries have a very different perspective about the war than the general people. The general mood on the ground, we saw it in Qatar World Cup. Israeli journalists were sort of trolled there. They were heckled there. None of the people, most of them, were not willing to come on those cameras which was being operated by Israeli channels. So this is something which we tend to not understand, that the general sentiment on ground. We saw that on repeatedly on Fridays there were protests in Jordan for the first 6-7 months. People used to get out the embassy. People used to march towards the Israel-Jordan border or West Bank Jordan border. But since you don't have democracy in most of the Middle Eastern countries, so certainly that is why a Bloomberg report recently came in that how Saudi Arabia is arresting Israeli critics. Immediately after that report was published, many Saudi influencers on the social media came out to say that, hey, I have been writing against Israel, but I have not been arrested. Similarly, there are many states which have secret arrangement as far as security cooperation is concerned, and that is exactly why they don't go against Israel in open, or they don't even sever their ties.
Right. I think that sums up the current situation in Rafah and also gives some context to our viewers to understand the history and broader geopolitics of what's happening in Gaza. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel because we keep bringing you updates not just from the Israel-Hamas war but also on all major news developments from India and across the world. Thank you for watching.